My name is Marcus, and I'm 34 years old. In exactly 47 minutes, I'll be lying dead on the floor of a Detroit convenience store. 2 bullets in my chest, my blood spreading across cold linoleum. But I don't know that yet as I arrange cigarette packs behind the counter at Quick Stop. March 15th, 2019, 9:00 p.m., Friday night, rain streaking down the windows, empty parking lot, just another shift. What I do know, what I'm absolutely certain of as I work, is who I am. I'm Muslim. Devoutly, completely, unshakably Muslim. It's not just what I believe, it's who I am. The son of Imam Hassan al-Rashid, a man who prays 5 times daily without fail, fasts beyond Ramadan, debates Christians online with confident certainty. I know exactly where I'm going when I die, to face Allah's judgment. My good deeds stacked against my sins, my prayers counted, my fasts measured, my Quran memorization tested. In my apartment closet sits a jar containing $4,247, every dollar saved for Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca that would complete my spiritual identity. I'm so sure of everything. I have no idea that in less than an hour, everything I believe will die along with my body, that the one who meets me on the other side won't be Allah, it will be Jesus Christ, and my certainty, built over 34 years, will shatter like glass hitting concrete. But that's getting ahead of the story. Let me take you back to the beginning, to who I was before 2 bullets and 8 minutes of death changed everything. I grew up in a household where faith wasn't optional, it was oxygen. My father led prayers at Al-Noor Islamic Center in Detroit. Every morning before dawn, his knock on my bedroom door, Fajr Marcus, time to pray. We'd prostrate toward Mecca together, reciting verses I'd memorized in Arabic before I could read English fluently. Islam gave me structure, purpose, identity. While my American classmates experimented with drugs and hookups, I prayed, fasted, studied Quran. I felt chosen, special, on the straight path while others stumbled in darkness. I pitied Christians especially. The Trinity made no sense. How could one God be three? How could the infinite creator squeeze himself into human flesh? It seemed like obvious blasphemy, a corruption of Abraham's pure monotheism. I debated them online constantly, armed with Quranic verses, confident in my superior logic. Jesus, just a prophet, not divine, never crucified. Islam taught that God had switched him with someone else at the last moment. The resurrection, a lie invented decades later. Christianity was a beautiful story built on a false foundation. I remember one conversation with my coworker David, a Christian who wore a small cross and refused to give up on me. One night during a slow shift, he asked quietly, "Marcus, what happens to me when I die, according to Islam?" I met his eyes. There's one unforgivable sin in Islam, shirk, associating partners with God, believing God has a son. That's shirk. So I'm going to hell. I'm telling you this because I care about you, David, if you just read the Quran with an open mind. I have read it, he interrupted, and I've prayed about it, and every time I pray, Jesus meets me, not as a prophet, as Lord. I shook my head, frustrated by his blindness. How could someone so intelligent believe something so illogical? Now, on this Friday night in March, as I organize Marlboro cartons and watch rain blur the parking lot, I'm thinking about my Hajj fund. 16 more months of saving and I'll finally make the pilgrimage, stand before the Kaaba, fulfill the 5th pillar, complete my spiritual journey. I glance at the clock, 9:47 p.m. In the next 13 minutes, 2 men in dark hoodies will walk through that door. One will pull out a gun. In my entire life, every prayer, every fast, every verse memorized, every dollar saved, every debate won, all of it will end in a moment of violence I never saw coming. But that's not where my story ends. That's where it truly begins. March 15th, 2019 was a Friday evening, and I was working the late shift at Quick Stop Convenience on Grand River Avenue. The store was located in a quiet neighborhood on Detroit's west side, not far from the University of Detroit Mercy campus. I'd worked there for 3 years without any major incidents, a few shoplifters, some drunk college kids causing minor trouble, but nothing serious, nothing that made me fear for my life. I remember the weather that night with crystal clarity, cold, drizzling rain, the kind of miserable March evening that keeps most people indoors, huddled under blankets, watching television. The kind of night where you look out the window and feel grateful you don't have to go anywhere. But I was there behind the counter because I needed the money. Not for myself, not for luxuries or entertainment. For Hajj, always for Hajj. Let me tell you about that dream because it consumed me. Every financial decision I made revolved around it. The pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't just a religious obligation. It was the culmination of everything I believed, everything I worked toward. to stand in front of the Kaaba, that ancient black cube draped in gold-embroidered cloth, to circle it 7 times with millions of other believers from every nation on earth. To drink from the well of Zamzam, to stand on the plain of Arafat where Muhammad delivered his final sermon, this was paradise on earth. This was the closest a living person could get to touching the divine. I had calculated everything down to the dollar. The package tour from Detroit to Jeddah, including flights, accommodations in Mecca and Medina, transportation between holy sites, meals, it would cost approximately $6,500. I was making $13.50 an hour at Quick Stop, working 40 to 50 hours per week depending on the schedule. After rent, utilities, food, and my monthly contribution to the mosque, I could save about $250 per month if I was disciplined, sometimes more if I picked up extra shifts. I'd been saving for 18 months and had just over $4,000 in my Hajj fund. By my calculations, I'd have enough by October 2020, 16 more months, just 16 more months, and I'd fulfill the 5th pillar of Islam. The jar in my closet wasn't just a container for cash. It was a symbol of devotion, of sacrifice, of priorities properly ordered. While my coworkers spent money on concerts, new phones, eating out, I deposited bills into that jar every single week. $20, $50. Once, after working a double shift on Thanksgiving, I put in $120. I'd write the date and amount on a small slip of paper and drop it in with the cash. I kept a running total. I'd take the jar out sometimes late at night and count the bills, smooth them out, organize them by denomination, and feel a deep satisfaction knowing I was building something meaningful. My father was proud of this goal. "You're following in the footsteps of the Prophet, peace be upon him," he'd tell me during our Sunday family dinners at my parents' house. "You're prioritizing akhira over dunya, the hereafter over this temporary world. This is what it means to be Muslim." The mosque community was my entire social world. Al-Noor Islamic Center wasn't just where I prayed, it was where I belonged. Friday Jummah prayers drew hundreds of men, filling the main prayer hall until we had to open the overflow rooms, and eventually pray outside in the parking lot during summer months. I knew dozens of brothers by name: Ahmed, Hassan, Ibrahim, Khalid, Yusuf. We'd pray shoulder to shoulder, prostrating in perfect synchronized rows. After prayers, we'd linger in the courtyard, discussing everything from politics to theology to finding halal restaurants downtown. I volunteered there twice a week, helping with youth programs, teaching Quran recitation to young boys who reminded me of myself at their age. Eager, earnest, hungry to please Allah and their fathers, I felt honored to pass on what had been given to me. Sometimes I'd lead the evening prayer when my father was traveling or ill. Standing in front of the congregation, dozens of men lined up behind me, following my movements, waiting for my voice to guide them through the surahs. It was the closest thing to power I'd ever experienced. Not power over people, but power with them, unified in submission to God. Ramadan was when our community truly came alive. The entire month transformed into a spiritual marathon. We'd break fast together every evening at the mosque, dates and water first, just as the Prophet did. Then a full meal of rice, chicken, lentil soup, fresh bread. The women's section would prepare massive quantities of food. The smell of cumin and cardamom would fill the entire building. Children would run through the halls, their laughter mixing with the sound of Quran recitation playing over the speakers. After eating, we'd pray Taraweeh, the special night prayers of Ramadan, which could last 2 hours. We'd stand and bow and prostrate until our knees ached and our backs screamed, but it was beautiful pain, purifying pain, the kind of pain that proves devotion. On the 27th night of Ramadan, Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, we'd stay up all night praying, reading Quran, making dua. The mosque would be packed from sunset to dawn. My father would give a special sermon about how this one night was worth more than 1,000 months of worship, how the angels descended to earth, how God decided everyone's fate for the coming year. I'd pray with such intensity that tears would flow down my face. "O Allah, forgive my sins, accept my worship. Make my scales heavy with good deeds, grant me paradise, keep me on the straight path." Eid celebrations afterward were pure joy. We'd gather at the mosque early in the morning, hundreds of families dressed in their finest clothes, men in white thobes and embroidered taqiyas, women in elegant hijabs and abayas. Children received money in crisp bills from their elders. We'd exchange hugs and greetings. Eid Mubarak, may Allah accept our fasts and prayers. The sense of accomplishment of having completed a month of discipline and devotion was intoxicating. We'd proven we could control our desires, deny ourselves, submit completely to God's commands. This was my life, this was my identity. These people were my family, not just by blood, but by faith, which I believed was a deeper bond. We shared something eternal, something that would last beyond death, beyond this temporary earthly existence. And I was certain, absolutely, unshakably certain, that we had the truth and everyone else was lost in darkness. I felt sorry for Christians, for Jews, for Hindus, for Buddhists, for atheists. They were going to hell unless they accepted Islam. That wasn't hatred or superiority. It was just fact, as clear to me as gravity or mathematics. The Quran said so. Muhammad said so. 1400 years of Islamic scholarship confirmed it. There was one straight path to paradise, and I was walking on it while others stumbled in confusion. But on this Friday night in March, as I stood behind the counter at Quick Stop organizing cigarette cartons and watching the rain streak down the front windows, I had no idea that my certainty was about to be tested in a way I never could have imagined. I had no idea that death was walking toward me through that rain. Before I tell you about that night, you need to understand something about who I was theologically. You need to understand the absolute, unshakable certainty I carried about Christianity being wrong, not just incomplete, wrong, corrupted, a deviation from the original message that Jesus himself preached. I was convinced that Christians had taken a simple prophet and turned him into God. It made no sense to me, none whatsoever. The logic seemed so obviously flawed that I honestly couldn't comprehend how billions of people believed it. God became a man. The creator of galaxies and atoms squeezed himself into human flesh. Impossible, illogical, blasphemous. The Trinity was my favorite target in debates. Explain to me, I'd type in online forums late at night after finishing my shift at Quick Stop, my fingers flying across the keyboard with confidence, how one God can be three persons. That's basic mathematics. One doesn't equal three. You're either monotheists or polytheists. You can't have it both ways. I'd quote Deuteronomy 6:4 back at Christians. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. One, not three in one, not a trinity. One, simple, clear, undeniable. When Christians would respond with explanations about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit being distinct persons but one essence, I'd shake my head at my screen. That's word games, I'd reply. You've invented a concept that doesn't exist in the original teachings. Jesus never claimed to be God. He called himself the Son of Man. He prayed to God. Why would God pray to himself? Your theology is incoherent. I had a whole arsenal of verses I'd use. When Christians quoted John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, I'd counter with verses where Jesus explicitly denies being God. When they pointed to Jesus saying, I and the Father are one in John 10:30, I'd explain that he meant unity of purpose, not unity of being. When they brought up Thomas calling Jesus, my Lord and my God, in John 20:28, I'd argue that was a cultural expression of amazement, not a theological statement. I felt intellectually superior, honestly. I felt like I had the clearer, more logical faith. Islam made sense. Christianity seemed like a puzzle with pieces forced together that didn't actually fit. But my theological certainty wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. I had a coworker at Quick Stop, a guy named David Martinez, who was a devout evangelical Christian. He wore a small silver cross around his neck that I noticed the first day he started working there. We'd end up on evening shifts together sometimes, and during the slow hours between 8 and 11 p.m. when foot traffic died down, we'd talk. David was relentless in a gentle way. He never pushed aggressively, but he'd find openings in conversations to bring up Jesus. Marcus, can I ask you something? Why do you think Jesus claimed to forgive sins? Only God can forgive sins. If Jesus was just a prophet, how did he have that authority? He didn't forgive sins, I'd respond, restocking candy bars or cleaning the coffee station while we talked. He interceded with God on behalf of people. Prophets do that. Moses did it. Muhammad did it. That's not claiming divinity. That's fulfilling the prophetic role. But Marcus, he said, your sins are forgiven, not I'll ask God to forgive you. There's a difference. You're reading too much into the language. One night, maybe 6 months before the shooting, David and I had our most intense debate. It was a Tuesday evening, raining like it would be on the night I died. A customer had just left after buying cigarettes and lottery tickets. David was leaning against the counter, and I was organizing receipts. Marcus, what do you think happens to me when I die? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, according to Islam, what happens to me, a Christian who believes Jesus is God. I hesitated. I liked David. He was kind, hardworking, never condescending even when we disagreed. But theology was theology. Truth was truth. David, look, Islam teaches that there's one unforgivable sin, shirk, associating partners with God, believing God has a son or that Jesus is God, that's shirk. So I'm going to hell. I didn't say. But that's what you believe, right? That my faith, the thing that gives my life meaning. The relationship I have with Jesus that saved me from depression and addiction. You believe that's sending me to hell. I met his eyes. I believe there's one path to paradise, and it's Islam. I believe Jesus was a prophet, not God. I believe you're sincere, but sincerity doesn't change truth. David, I'm telling you this because I care about you. If you just read the Quran with an open mind. I have read it, he interrupted quietly, and I've prayed about it. And every time I pray, Jesus meets me, not as a prophet, as Lord, as God, as Savior. I've experienced his presence, Marcus. How do I deny what I've experienced? Experience can be deceptive. Emotions aren't reliable. We need revelation, clear divine instruction. The Quran is that instruction. And the Bible isn't. The Bible has been corrupted over centuries, translations upon translations, human interference. The Quran has been preserved perfectly in Arabic since it was revealed. David pulled his cross out from under his shirt and held it between his fingers. This cross represents something you don't believe happened. You think Jesus wasn't crucified, right? Right? God wouldn't allow his prophet to be humiliated that way. Allah substituted someone else, probably Judas, and raised Jesus directly to heaven. So all the eyewitness accounts, the Roman historical records, the fact that Christianity exploded specifically because people claim to have seen the crucified Jesus risen from the dead, all of that is fabricated. Not fabricated, mistaken, deceived. God can do anything, including making people think they saw something they didn't. That sounds like, David paused, choosing his words carefully. That sounds like saying God is deceptive, that he'd let billions of people believe a lie for 2,000 years. Not a lie, a test, to see who seeks truth versus who follows the crowd. We stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerators and the patter of rain on the windows filling the space. Finally, David said, Marcus, I'm going to keep praying for you, not in a condescending way. I genuinely hope you'll encounter Jesus the way I have. I felt a flash of annoyance mixed with pity. David, I appreciate that, but I'm praying for you too. I'm praying you'll accept the final revelation before it's too late. Before what's too late? Before death, after death, there's no more chances. Judgment is final. He nodded slowly. On that, we agree. Judgment is final. That conversation haunted me more than I wanted to admit, not because I doubted I didn't, but because David seemed so certain and his certainty matched my own. Two people, absolutely convinced they had the truth, praying for each other's soul. One of us had to be wrong. I knew it wasn't me. But standing there behind that quick-stop counter on March 15, 2019, with less than 2 hours left before I'd meet death face to face, I had no idea how profoundly, devastatingly wrong I was about everything. Around 9:47 p.m., I was restocking cigarettes behind the counter, organizing them by brand. Marlboro Reds on the left, Newport Menthols in the middle, Camel Lights on the right. It was monotonous work, but I didn't mind. The repetition left my mind free to think, to reflect, to plan. I was mentally calculating my Hajj fund as I worked. I got my paycheck that afternoon, $542 after taxes for 42 hours. After rent was due on the first, $650 for my studio apartment. After the electricity bill, $73 this month. After groceries, I could do $120 if I was careful. After my monthly donation to Al Noor Islamic Center, $50, my father expected it. I'd have about $250 left to deposit into the jar. That would bring my total to $4,250. Getting closer, always getting closer. The store was almost empty. We did maybe 15 customers in the past 2 hours. Friday nights in March weren't busy, especially with weather like this. Most people were home, warm, dry, probably watching movies or hosting dinner parties. I glanced at the clock on the wall behind me, 9:47 p.m. exactly. 3 hours and 13 minutes until my shift ended at 1:00 a.m. Then I'd drive home in my beat-up 2004 Honda Civic. Probably stopping at the 24-hour McDonald's for a fish sandwich and fries, the one meal they served that was reliably halal. Get home around 1:30 a.m., pray Isha if I hadn't been able to step away during my shift, and collapse into bed. Saturday was my day off. I was planning to go to the mosque for Jummah. Wait, no, Jummah was Friday. I'd already gone this afternoon before my shift started. Saturday I'd probably sleep in, do laundry, maybe visit my parents' house for dinner. My mother always cooked too much food on Saturdays: lamb biryani, chicken kebabs, fresh naan. Enough to feed 10 people, even though it was usually just my parents, my younger sister Amina, and me. Mom would pack leftovers in Tupperware containers and force me to take them home. You're too skinny, Marcus. You work too much. Eat, eat. I smiled at the thought as I straightened a row of Camel filters. My mother's love language was food, always had been. Even when I was a child and would fast voluntarily on Mondays and Thursdays like the Prophet used to do, she'd worry. You're growing, you need energy. Are you sure Allah wants you to go hungry? My father would gently correct her. Let the boy worship. He's following the sunnah. This is good. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the storefront windows in sheets. I could see the parking lot through the glass, empty except for my Honda and one other car, probably belonging to whoever was at the laundromat next door. The streetlight in front of the store flickered occasionally, casting unstable shadows across the wet pavement. Everything looked washed out, blurred, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. I thought about praying. I'd missed Isha, the night prayer, and it was weighing on me. Technically, I had until midnight, but I liked to pray at around 9:00 p.m. I glanced around the store. No customers. Maybe I could step into the back room for 5 minutes, spread my prayer mat. I kept one in my backpack and quickly performed the 4 rakats. But what if someone came in? What if someone tried to rob the place while I was in the back? My manager had strict rules. Never leave the counter unattended during your shift. Never. I'd pray when I got home. It would have to wait. I moved from cigarettes to organizing the lottery ticket display, making sure the Powerball and Mega Millions tickets were properly stocked. People loved wasting money on these things, trading real dollars for impossible dreams. I'd never bought a lottery ticket in my life. Gambling was haram, forbidden in Islam. Even if I was desperate for money, even if I needed it for something as worthy as Hajj, I wouldn't compromise. The money had to be halal, earned through honest work, untainted by sin. That was the difference between Islam and other religions, I thought as I worked. We had clear rules, clear boundaries, black and white, halal and haram, right and wrong. Christianity seemed so vague by comparison, so dependent on personal interpretation and feeling. Follow your heart, God will guide you. Grace covers everything. It all seemed so loose, undisciplined. How could you build a righteous life without clear commands? The fluorescent lights above me buzzed slightly, a sound I'd long since learned to tune out. The refrigerators along the back wall hummed. The radio behind the counter played soft R&B, volume low. The smell of old coffee from the machine near the door mixed with the faint scent of cleaning solution I'd used to mop the floors an hour ago. Normal, everything was completely normal. I had no premonition, no warning, no sense that anything was about to change. I wasn't thinking about death or judgment or eternity. I was thinking about Hajj money and my mother's biryani, and whether I'd have time to stop at McDonald's after my shift. I was thinking about ordinary things because I thought I had plenty of time left to think about them. Then the door chimed. I looked up from the lottery tickets and saw 2 men entering the store. Both were wearing dark hoodies, hoods pulled up over their heads despite being indoors. Both had their hands in their pockets. Both moved with a strange, jerky energy that made my stomach tighten instinctively. Something felt wrong. Immediately wrong. Their body language was all off, the way they looked around nervously, the way they avoided making eye contact with me, the tension radiating from their movements. One was tall and thin, maybe 6'2", white or Hispanic. I couldn't tell with the hood shadowing his face. The other was shorter, stockier, African-American, with a patchy beard visible beneath his hood. They didn't browse, didn't head for the coolers or the chip aisle or the candy. They just stood near the door for a moment, looking around, looking at me. My heart started beating faster. "Can I help you?" I called out, trying to sound casual, professional, like I hadn't noticed anything strange. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Neither responded. They started walking toward the counter, slowly, deliberately. My mouth went dry, my palms started sweating. Every instinct I had was screaming danger, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe they were just weird customers. Maybe they'd ask for cigarettes behind the counter. Maybe I was overreacting. But I wasn't overreacting. The taller one reached the counter first. His hand came out of his pocket. He was holding a gun. A black semi-automatic pistol pointed directly at my face. And in that instant, everything in my life, every prayer, every fast, every verse of Quran I'd memorized, every argument about theology, every dollar saved for Hajj, all of it shrank down to this single moment, this single choice, this single question. Was I going to die tonight? Everything went into slow motion. Not metaphorically, not like in movies where they use special effects. Actually, genuinely slow. Time stretched like taffy, each second expanding into something thick and viscous that I could feel myself moving through. I could see the gun in perfect detail. Black metal, scratches on the barrel. The circular opening of the muzzle pointed at my face, dark and infinite. I could see the man's finger on the trigger, shaking. His whole hand was shaking. "Open the register now," he screamed, and his voice sounded distorted, underwater, echoing. His hands were shaking violently. That registered somewhere in my brain. He's more scared than I am. Scared people with guns make mistakes. Scared people with guns pull triggers accidentally. I raised my hands slowly, palms out. Okay, just stay calm. I'll give you whatever you want. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, could feel it in my throat. My mouth had gone completely dry. My hands were trembling as I held them up. The second robber was yelling at his partner. Hurry up, man, someone's gonna see us. I'm going as fast as I can, the one with the gun shouted back, his voice cracking with panic. I started moving toward the register, slowly, carefully, trying not to make any sudden movements that might startle him. My fingers fumbled with the keys on my belt. I had to open the register manually. The touchscreen was on the customer side of the counter. Just give them the money, I was thinking. Your life is worth more than this. Your life is worth more than the $300 in the register. Give them the money and they'll leave and you'll be fine. You'll call the police. You'll give them the security camera footage. They'll catch these guys, but you'll be alive. You'll be okay. I got the key into the register lock. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The register drawer popped open with its familiar electronic beep and mechanical slide. Everything, the gunman demanded. All of it now. I started placing bills on the counter. 20s, 10s, 5s, 1s, moving slowly, carefully, trying not to provoke them, trying to stay calm even though every nerve in my body was screaming danger. The shorter robber was packing by the door, looking out the windows, looking back at me, looking at his partner. Come on, he kept muttering, his voice high with stress. I could hear the rain hammering against the windows, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my own breath coming in short, shallow gasps, the rustle of bills as I set them on the counter. I was maybe 30 seconds away from this being over. 30 seconds, and they'd have the money, and they'd run, and I'd be safe. Then everything went wrong. A car pulled into the parking lot outside. Headlights swept across the storefront windows. The shorter robber saw it first. Shit, someone's here. The gunman panicked, his head whipped toward the windows, his whole body tensed. No one's coming in, I said quickly, desperately trying to defuse the situation. Look, the car's going to the laundromat. See, no one's coming here. Take the money, just take it and go. But they weren't listening anymore. Fear had taken over completely. The taller one looked back at me, and in his eyes I saw pure terror mixed with something worse. Decision. He'd made a choice. He was going to eliminate the witness. I saw the gun rise. I saw it point directly at my chest. Time seemed to fracture into pieces, reality splitting apart at the seams. My last thought was a prayer, Allahu Akbar, God is greatest. I started reciting the Shahada, the declaration of faith that every Muslim hopes will be their final words. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. The explosion of sound came next. A gunshot so loud it seemed to tear reality apart, ripping through the quiet store like thunder at close range. Searing, burning pain erupted in my chest like being hit with a sledgehammer wrapped in fire. Not sharp, not like a cut, massive, crushing, like my entire ribcage had been struck by a wrecking ball made of molten metal. I stumbled backward and crashed into the cigarette rack behind me. Packs of Marlboros cascaded down around me as I fell. Red boxes, white boxes, gold boxes. They rained down in slow motion, tumbling through the air. I remember touching my chest. My hand came away red, wet, warm, so much blood. It was spreading across my shirt, soaking through the fabric, pooling in my palm. Another shot rang out. This one struck my shoulder, spinning me as I collapsed. White-hot pain exploded through my left side. The impact twisted my body. My legs gave out completely. I hit the floor hard. The cold linoleum pressed against my cheek. I could smell the cleaning solution I'd used earlier. I could see the tiles up close, dingy white with years of scuff marks that no amount of mopping could remove. The robbers' footsteps were running now, thundering toward the door. Panic, chaos. The door chimed again as they fled into the night. The sound was cheerful, completely at odds with what had just happened. The same pleasant ding that sounded every time someone entered or exited. I tried to breathe. My lungs wouldn't work properly. It felt like drowning on dry land, like someone had filled my chest cavity with concrete. Each attempt to inhale brought a wet, rattling sound, and stabbing pain that made me want to scream, but I couldn't even scream because I couldn't get enough air. Blood was pooling around me, warm, sticky, spreading outward across the floor. I could see it in my peripheral vision, dark red, almost black under the fluorescent lights. The lights above seemed impossibly bright, burning into my vision. Each one had a halo around it, glowing, pulsing in rhythm with my fatting heartbeat. I'm dying, I thought with absolute clarity. This is how I die. This is the moment, right now, right here on this floor. I tried to finish the Shahada. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of God. But the words came out as barely a whisper, more breath than sound. Darkness crept in from the edges of my vision like a curtain closing, like ink spreading through water, swallowing everything. My last conscious thought was a desperate plea. Allah, forgive my sins, accept me into paradise. I tried to live righteously. Please, please let it be enough. And then there was nothing. Just darkness. Just the silence. Just the end. The pain vanished. Instantly, completely, utterly gone. One moment I was drowning in agony, my chest crushed, my shoulder on fire, blood pooling beneath me. And the next moment nothing, no pain, no sensation at all, just absence. I was suddenly elsewhere, but still there at the same time. I was floating, looking down, and I could see myself on the floor. My body looked so small, so broken, so utterly, devastatingly lifeless. I was lying in a spreading pool of blood that seemed impossibly red under those harsh fluorescent lights, brighter than blood should be, more vivid, like someone had turned up the saturation on reality itself. The blood was still spreading outward slowly, following the grooves between the floor tiles, reaching toward the base of the counter. I could see the bullet wounds, 2 dark holes in my chest and shoulder, the fabric of my quick-stop uniform shirt torn and soaked through. I could see the unnatural angle of my left arm, twisted beneath me where I'd fallen. I could see my face, my own face, pale, lips slightly parted, eyes half open but empty, staring at nothing, seeing nothing. There was a pack of Marlboro Reds still clutched in my right hand, fingers loosely curled around it. I'd been holding it when I was shot, when I fell backward into the cigarette rack. That detail struck me as absurdly tragic. I died holding cigarettes I'd been restocking, cigarettes I'd never even smoked because smoking was haram. I knew immediately I was dead. There was no question about it, no uncertainty, no hopping maybe I was just unconscious, maybe I was having a near-death hallucination, maybe the paramedics would arrive and save me. No, I was dead, completely, irreversibly, definitively dead. I could see my body down there and I wasn't in it anymore. Whatever I was now, consciousness, soul, spirit, it had separated from that broken shell on the floor. Strange thing, no fear came, no panic seized me, just profound confusion and intense curiosity. How was I seeing without eyes? How was I thinking without a brain? How was I existing without a body? I tried to move back to my body, tried to somehow re-enter it, but I couldn't. There was a barrier I couldn't cross, an invisible wall between what I was now and what I had been. And there was something else, a pulling sensation, gentle but insistent, like a current in water, drawing me away from the scene below. This can't be real, I thought. This must be the moment before judgment, the transition, the barzakh, the barrier between life and death that the Quran speaks about. I waited to see angels. I expected the angel of death, Azrael, that Islam taught me would come to escort souls to their judgment. I braced myself for Munkar and Nakir, the questioning angels of the grave, who would sit me up in my burial place and interrogate me. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? I prepared myself for judgment, for the weighing of my deeds. Would my good deeds outweigh my sins on the scales? Had I prayed enough, fasted enough, given enough charity, memorized enough Quran, saved enough money for Hajj even though I never got to go? The questions raced through my consciousness faster than thought, each one carrying the weight of eternity. But nothing happened the way I'd been taught. No angels appeared with scrolls recording my deeds. No scales materialized to weigh my prayers against my sins. No voice called out to announce my fate, paradise or hellfire. Just the silence. And then suddenly I was pulled away. Not physically, I didn't have a physical body anymore, but my consciousness was yanked elsewhere with tremendous force, like being caught in a riptide and dragged out to sea. The convenience store disappeared completely, the image of my body on the floor vanishing as if someone had switched off a television. Everything became dark. Not the darkness of closing your eyes or standing in a room without light, something deeper, more absolute, more consuming. a darkness that seemed to have weight and substance, pressing against me from all sides, even though I had no sides to press against. Yet somehow I could still sense myself, still think, still exist as a conscious being even though I had no body, no form, no physical presence whatsoever. Where are the angels? I thought desperately. Where is the judgment? Panic started to set in, cold and creeping, spreading through my consciousness like ice water. This wasn't what the Quran described. This wasn't what my father had taught me. This wasn't what I'd believed my entire life. There was supposed to be a bridge as surat, stretching over hell, thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword. There were supposed to be scales weighing my deeds against my sins. There was supposed to be clarity, structure, order. The afterlife was supposed to make sense according to Islamic theology. But this formless, endless darkness, this absence of everything I'd been promised. I tried to pray, Allah, where are you? I served you faithfully. I kept every prayer, every fast. I memorized your words. I defended your religion. I lived according to your law. The darkness seemed to respond, but not with words, with presence, with something I couldn't name, something that acknowledged I'd spoken but offered no answer, no comfort, no explanation. I felt utterly, completely alone in a way I'd never experienced in life. Even in my darkest moments of sadness or confusion, I'd always had prayer, always had the certainty that Allah was listening, always had the structure of Islam to guide me. But here in this darkness, I had nothing, no direction, no guidance, no certainty. Time had no meaning in that place. Was I there for seconds, hours, years, eternity? I couldn't tell. There were no reference points, no way to measure anything, just endless, pressing darkness, and the slow, creeping terror that this was it. This was my eternity, alone in darkness forever. Is this punishment? I wondered, horror building. Is this hell? What did I do wrong? The questions tormented me worse than any physical pain I'd ever felt. I reviewed my life in my mind. My prayers 5 times daily, never missed except when I was sick. My charity, regular donations to the mosque. My fasting, Ramadan plus Mondays and Thursdays. My devotion, memorizing Quran, defending Islam online, saving for Hajj. I was good. I followed the straight path. I did everything right. So why am I here in this darkness? The confusion was worse than any physical pain I'd ever felt, worse than the bullets tearing through my chest, worse than the burning in my shoulder. This was existential agony, the terror of realizing everything you believed might be wrong. The darkness pressed closer, heavier, like it was trying to suffocate me even though I had no lungs to breathe with. I felt the weight of it against my consciousness, crushing, oppressive, infinite. How long was I there? Seconds, hours, years, eternity. Time had completely lost meaning. There were no reference points, no cycles of day and night, no heartbeat to measure moments by, just endless, pressing darkness, and the slow, creeping realization that I might be trapped here forever. I tried to remember my life with perfect clarity, searching for what I'd done wrong. Had I missed prayers? No. Had I cheated someone? No. Had I consumed haram food or drink? Never. Had I committed major sins? I didn't think so. I'd lived righteously according to Islamic law. I'd followed the Quran. I'd emulated the Prophet Muhammad's example. So why wasn't Allah here? Why weren't the angels here? Why was I alone in this void? The theology I'd studied my entire life said the afterlife would be immediate and clear. The righteous would see angels of light bearing perfumed shrouds. The wicked would see angels of punishment coming to drag their souls to hellfire. There would be questioning in the grave, Munkar and Nakir asking about my faith, my Lord, my Prophet. There would be either comfort or torment based on my answers. But there was nothing, no angels, no questions, no comfort, no torment, just this terrible, suffocating absence. Maybe this is the torment, I thought with growing horror. Maybe the punishment for some sin I can't even identify. Is this eternal isolation, this consciousness without purpose, this existence without end or explanation? Then something changed. Far in the distance, impossibly far away, at a distance that seemed to span galaxies, a pinpoint of light appeared. Not like a star in the night sky, not like someone turning on a flashlight in a dark room, more like the light was creating itself, birthing from nothing, pushing back against the darkness that surrounded me. It was warm, inviting, but also terrifying in its intensity. The moment I saw it, I felt something radiating from it even across that impossible distance. Love, but not human love, not the love of a mother for her child or the affection between friends. This was something else entirely. Acceptance so profound it made me want to weep, though I had no eyes to cry with, and terrible, wonderful truth that would destroy everything I thought I knew. The light grew larger, closer, Or perhaps I was moving toward it, I couldn't tell which. I started to resist instinctively. No, I need Allah, I need Islam, that's my faith, that's my identity, that's everything I am. But the pull was irresistible, like gravity but stronger, like being caught in a current too powerful to swim against. I couldn't fight it even if I wanted to, and part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, didn't want to fight it. The closer I got, the more I could feel what was emanating from that light. It wasn't just warmth and love, it was revelation. It was answers to questions I'd been asking my whole life without even knowing I was asking them. It was completion of something that had always been incomplete in my soul. The light wasn't blinding but revealing. It wasn't obscuring truth, it was truth itself, undeniable and absolute, showing me things I'd never seen, realities I'd never considered. I could feel my Islamic worldview beginning to crack like ice under pressure. 34 years of certainty, of theology, of prayer and fasting and Quran memorization. All of it starting to fracture, hairline cracks spreading through the foundation of everything I believed. Terror and ecstasy mixed together in equal measure. I was about to lose myself completely, and I was about to find myself for the first time. What is this? My consciousness screamed into the void. Who is this? But even as I asked, somewhere deep in my soul, deeper than theology, deeper than training, deeper than everything my father taught me, I already knew the answer. And that knowledge terrified me more than anything that had come before. Ask yourself this question right now, whoever you are, wherever you are reading this. What would you do if everything you'd ever believed was about to be challenged? What would you do if your entire worldview, the foundation of your identity, was about to shatter like glass? Would you cling to what you've always known? Or would you follow truth even if it cost you everything? Because that's where I was, standing, if you could call it standing without a body, at the edge of the most important decision any soul can make. The light grew brighter still. I was being drawn into it now, not just toward it. The darkness that had surrounded me was evaporating like morning mist under the sun. I felt myself accelerating, moving faster and faster towards something I couldn't comprehend. My Islamic theology screamed in protest. This isn't Allah. This isn't what we were promised. This is deception. This is Satan trying to mislead you at the moment of death. But another voice, quieter, deeper, truer, whispered, what if everything you've been taught was incomplete? What if there's more to the story than you knew? The light consumed everything now. I emerged into it completely, surrounded by it, bathed in it, unable to escape it or hide from it. And there, standing before me in that space that was everywhere and nowhere at once, more real than anything I'd ever encountered in life or death. I saw him. I saw Jesus Christ. And everything I believed died in that moment. I stood, though I had no body, in a space that was everywhere and nowhere at once. Pure white light surrounded me, but it didn't hurt to look at. It wasn't blinding like staring at the sun or harsh like fluorescent bulbs. It was revealing, illuminating, showing me things I'd never been able to see before. And there before me was a figure radiating power and love in equal measure. I knew him instantly, though I'd never believed in him this way before. Not as a mere prophet, not as a created being, not as someone God had substituted on the cross with another person. Jesus Christ stood before me. Not the pale, blue-eyed European version from the paintings I'd seen online when debating Christians. He was radiant, glorious, powerful, more real than anything I'd ever encountered in life or death. His presence was more solid than reality itself, more substantial than the entire universe. He was the most real thing I'd ever experienced. And everything else, my life, my death, the convenience store, Detroit, Earth itself, suddenly felt like shadows in comparison. His eyes held galaxies, depths I couldn't fathom. When he looked at me, I felt seen in a way I'd never been seen before, not just observed but known, completely, utterly, devastatingly known. I felt myself falling, not physically, I still had no body, but spiritually, collapsing under the weight of his holiness. His perfection was like a physical force pressing against my consciousness, and I couldn't stand before it. Every sin I'd ever committed was suddenly, horrifyingly visible, not just actions but thoughts, intentions, the pride I'd felt when debating Christians online, the self-righteousness I'd carried about my prayers and fasting, the judgment I'd passed on others who didn't follow Islam, the lust I'd pushed down but never truly conquered, the times I'd been harsh with my mother when she worried about me, the moments I'd felt superior to my coworkers, the hatred I'd harbored toward people who mocked my faith. Every dark corner of my soul was exposed to perfect light. I was naked before him, utterly exposed. There was nowhere to hide, no fig leaf of good deeds to cover my shame. I was terrified, more terrified than I'd been when the gun pointed at my chest, more terrified than in the darkness. This was holy terror, standing before absolute purity while being absolutely impure. I'm going to be destroyed, I thought with crushing certainty. I'm going to cease to exist. This holiness will consume me completely. I can't survive this. No one can survive this. But then he smiled. And in that smile was more love than I'd ever known could exist in the universe. Not conditional love. Not I'll love you if you pray 5 times daily, love. Not I'll love you if you're good enough, love. Just love, pure, unconditional, overwhelming love that crashed over me like a wave. He spoke not with words in the way humans speak, not vibrations in air that ears process into meaning. He spoke directly into my being, into my consciousness, bypassing all physical mechanics entirely. And what he said shattered me completely. Marcus, I know you. I've always known you. The sound of my name on his lips, or rather the experience of my name resonating through every part of my consciousness, broke something inside me. He knew me, not just facts about me, not just what I'd done or what I believed. Me, the real me beneath all the theology and ritual and certainty. But you're Jesus, I stammered in my mind, confusion and terror mixing together. You're not, you can't be, I don't understand. My entire Islamic worldview was screaming in protest. Jesus is just a prophet. He's not God. He's not divine. This is Shaitan deceiving you. This is the ultimate test at the moment of death. Don't fall for it. But standing before him, or existing before him, since I couldn't really stand, I knew with certainty beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond any argument I'd ever made or heard. He was exactly who he claimed to be. He wasn't just divine, he was God. God made flesh, the Word made incarnate. Everything Christians had been trying to tell me for years, everything I'd mocked and debated and rejected with such confidence, it was true. It had always been true. The Trinity suddenly made sense in a way words could never explain. I could see, not with eyes but with spiritual understanding, how God could be one yet three. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, not 3 gods, not a contradiction, but perfect unity, perfect love, perfect communion existing eternally within the Godhead. It wasn't illogical. My logic had been too small to contain it. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd been taught since childhood, everything my father, the Imam, had instilled in me, it was crumbling, collapsing like sandcastles before an incoming tide, 34 years of certainty dissolving in an instant. Why, I asked, and my voice, my consciousness, broke with the weight of the question. Why did you let me believe a lie my whole life? Why didn't you show me this before? Why did you let me waste 34 years following the wrong path? His response shook me to my core, gentle yet absolute, loving yet uncompromising. I never left you, Marcus. I called to you many times, but you chose what was familiar, what was comfortable, what your family taught you. You closed your ears to my voice. And then he showed me. Visions flooded my consciousness, memories I'd buried or dismissed or ignored. Every moment he had tried to reach me became crystal clear, undeniable, impossible to rationalize away anymore. I saw my life replayed, but through his eyes. Every moment he had tried to reach me became crystal clear, undeniable, impossible to dismiss anymore. I was 20 years old again, a sophomore at Wayne State University studying business management. I lived in a small apartment near campus, praying 5 times daily on my prayer mat, attending Friday prayers at the mosque without fail. My neighbor across the hall was a man named Thomas Chen, a Chinese-American graduate student studying theology at a Christian seminary. Thomas was kind, always smiling, always greeting me warmly when we passed in the hallway. We'd sometimes chat about classes, about Detroit, about the weather, surface-level stuff. He never pushed his faith on me, never made me uncomfortable. Until one day in October, he knocked on my door. "Hey Marcus," he said when I opened it. "I know this might be completely out of line, and please tell me if it is, but my church is having a special service this Sunday. It's about interfaith dialogue and understanding. They invited a Muslim speaker to share about Islam, and we're having food from different cultures afterward. Would you want to come, just to observe, maybe help us understand your faith better?" I remember the exact feeling in my chest, a strange pull, curiosity mixed with something else, something I couldn't name. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me was genuinely curious about what happened in a Christian church, what they believed, how they worshipped. But I said no. "I appreciate the invitation, Thomas, but I don't think that's appropriate for me. Islam and Christianity are fundamentally different. I don't want to give the impression that all religions are equally valid paths to God. There's only one true path, and that's Islam." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I respect that, Marcus. The invitation's always open if you change your mind. After he left, I closed my door and went back to studying. I felt proud of myself for standing firm in my faith, for not compromising, for not being led astray by interfaith pluralism. Now, standing before Jesus, I saw that moment differently. I saw Thomas praying for me that morning, asking God to give him courage to invite me. I saw the genuine love he had for me, not as a conversion project, but as a neighbor, as a human being. I saw Jesus orchestrating that moment, that invitation, that opportunity. And I saw myself mock Thomas afterward. The next Friday at the mosque, I told my friends about it. This Christian guy invited me to his church, I said, laughing. Can you believe that? Like I'd step foot in a place where they worship a man as God. I told him no way. These people are so lost, may Allah guide them. My friends laughed with me. We joked about the Trinity, about how Christians couldn't even count to one properly. We felt superior, certain, secure in our Islamic identity. But now I saw Jesus standing in that hallway with Thomas and me, invisible to us, reaching out, calling my name, and I'd walked away. You were there, I whispered, overwhelmed by the realization. I was always there, Jesus replied. The vision shifted. I was 28 years old, sitting in my apartment late at night, scrolling through YouTube on my laptop. I just finished my shift at Quick Stop and was unwinding before bed. The algorithm recommended a video, The Case for Christ, Former Atheist Investigates Christianity. I almost scrolled past it, but something made me click. Curiosity, boredom, I couldn't remember anymore. I watched for 7 minutes. The video featured a man named Lee Strobel, a former journalist who'd investigated the historical evidence for Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. He presented evidence I'd never heard before: early manuscripts, eyewitness accounts, archaeological findings, the transformation of the disciples from fearful men into martyrs. It was compelling, disturbingly compelling. Doubt crept in for just a moment. What if the crucifixion really happened? What if Jesus really did rise from the dead? What if? No, I stopped the thought immediately. This was Shaitan whispering doubt. This was exactly how Christians deceived people, with emotional appeals and pseudoscientific arguments that sounded good, but ignored the clear teachings of the Quran. I clicked away from the video and immediately searched for Islamic apologetics debunking Christianity. I found a video titled 10 Reasons Why Jesus Couldn't Be God, and watched the whole thing, feeling my certainty return with each point. Then I went to the comments section of the original video and left a comment. This is lies and deception. The Bible has been corrupted over centuries. Jesus never claimed divinity. Study Islam if you want the truth about Jesus, peace be upon him. He was a prophet, nothing more. I posted it and felt righteous. I defended Islam. I'd stood against falsehood. Now, watching this memory play out before me, I saw Jesus reaching for me through that video. I saw the Holy Spirit nudging my heart, creating that moment of curiosity, that crack in my certainty. I saw the door opening just a fraction of an inch. And I saw myself slam it shut with anger and pride. You were trying to reach me, I said, tears streaming down my non-existent face, or at least the spiritual equivalent of tears. I never stopped trying, he said. Another vision. I was 16 years old, sleeping in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house. My father had just given me a book about the Prophet Muhammad's life, and I'd stayed up late reading it, filled with zeal for Islam. That night, I had a dream. I was walking through a field of white flowers under a brilliant blue sky. Everything was peaceful, beautiful, filled with light, and in the distance, I saw a figure in white robes walking toward me. As he approached, I felt overwhelming love radiating from him, peace beyond anything I'd ever experienced, joy that seemed to fill the entire universe. He reached out his hand toward me and spoke my name, Marcus. His voice was like music and thunder combined. I wanted to run to him, to embrace him, to stay in that presence forever. But then I heard my father's voice calling me from somewhere far away. Marcus, time for Fajr prayer, wake up. The dream dissolved. I woke up in my dark bedroom, my alarm clock showing 5:30 a.m. My father was knocking on my door. I'm up, I called out groggily. I went to the bathroom, performed wudu, the ritual washing before prayer, and joined my father in our living room for the dawn prayer. We prostrated toward Mecca. We recited verses from the Quran. We fulfilled our religious obligation. The dream faded from my memory. By lunchtime, I'd dismissed it entirely. Just random neurons firing during REM sleep, I told myself. Dreams don't mean anything. But now I saw the truth. That figure in white had been Jesus. He'd come to me in my dreams when I was still young, still open, still seeking. He'd called my name. He'd reached out his hand. And I dismissed it as meaningless brain activity. "Oh God," I groaned, the weight of regret crushing me. "You were calling me since I was a child." "I've loved you since before you were born," Jesus said gently. One more vision, December 24th, 3 years before my death, Christmas Eve. I was 27 years old, walking home from work at the quick stop. The bus had broken down, so I was walking the 1.5 miles to my apartment in the cold Detroit winter. I passed a church, a small brick building with a lit-up sign that read Grace Community Church. The parking lot was full of cars. Through the windows, I could see warm light and people gathering inside. Music drifted out into the cold night air, not the call to prayer I was used to, not Quranic recitation, but singing, harmonious, beautiful singing about a baby born in Bethlehem. I stopped walking. I stood on the sidewalk outside that church, listening, and for just a moment, just one brief, inexplicable moment, I felt peace. Deep, profound peace that wrapped around me like a warm blanket despite the freezing temperature. Part of me wanted to go inside, to see what was happening, to understand why these people seemed so joyful, so full of something I couldn't name. But I pushed the feeling away immediately. "That's not for you," I told myself firmly. "That's for them. You have Islam. You don't need whatever they have in there." I walked away quickly, almost running, as if staying too long might contaminate me somehow. I got home, prayed Isha, and ate dinner. I never thought about that moment again. Until now. Now I saw Jesus standing on that sidewalk with me, invisible, calling my name through the music, through the peace, through the inexplicable pull in my heart. I saw him waiting for me to turn around, to take one step toward that church door, to seek him with even a fraction of openness. And I saw myself run away. "You were always there," I whispered, overwhelmed. "You were always calling, and I kept running away." "Yes," Jesus said, and his voice held infinite sadness mixed with infinite love. "But Marcus, I love you." Those 3 words, "I love you," contained oceans of meaning, depths of grace I couldn't comprehend. They washed over me, through me, breaking apart the last remaining pieces of my Islamic certainty. "But I rejected you," I said, my voice, my consciousness breaking completely. "I called you a liar. I denied your divinity. I spoke against you for years. I debated Christians and told them they were deceived. I mocked your followers. I said the crucifixion never happened, that God would never allow his prophet to suffer that way." "I know," he said gently, and there was no condemnation in his voice. No anger, no rejection, just infinite patience and understanding. "And yet I died for you anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. Died for me, not just for humanity in some abstract theological sense, but specifically, personally, individually for me, for Marcus, for the Muslim man who'd spent 34 years denying him. "Islam taught me you weren't really crucified," I said, desperately trying to reconcile what I was experiencing with what I'd believed. "Islam taught me that God switched you with someone else at the last moment, maybe Judas, maybe Simon of Cyrene, that you ascended directly to heaven without suffering, that God would never allow his prophet to be humiliated like that." "Do you want to see the truth?" he asked. Before I could answer, the vision changed. I was no longer standing in that space of light. I was standing on a hill outside Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The sky was dark, unnaturally dark, as if creation itself was mourning. The air smelled of death and sweat and blood. And there before me were 3 crosses silhouetted against that darkened sky. The middle cross held Jesus. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close my eyes, if I had eyes, but I couldn't. I was forced to witness what I'd denied my entire life. I saw the Roman soldiers, brutal men hardened by years of executions, treating this as just another day's work. I saw them drive iron spikes through his hands, not through the palms where paintings always showed them, but through the wrists between the bones where they could support the weight of a body. I heard him scream in agony, a sound of suffering beyond human comprehension. God made flesh experiencing the full horror of human pain without any divine anesthesia. I saw them lift the cross and drop it into the hole prepared for it. The jarring impact drove the nails deeper. His body sagged under its own weight, making breathing nearly impossible. To exhale, he had to push himself up on the nails through his feet, scraping his torn back against the rough wood. This wasn't a symbol. This wasn't a metaphor. This wasn't God pretending to suffer while secretly protecting his prophet. This was real. This was brutal. This was horrifying. I watched him suffocate slowly. Every breath was a battle. Every moment was torture. Blood ran down his arms, sweat mixed with blood on his face. His lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. And I understood something that Islam had never taught me. This was necessary, not because God was sadistic or weak or unable to find another way, but because sin, my sin, humanity's sin, required a perfect sacrifice. The law demanded blood, justice demanded payment, and only God himself could pay the price that justice demanded while satisfying mercy's requirements. In Islam, I had tried to earn salvation through works, prayer 5 times daily, fasting during Ramadan and extra days beyond that, charity, memorizing Quran, pilgrimage to Mecca, good deeds stacked up like bricks, hoping they would be enough, hoping the scale would tip in my favor on Judgment Day, hoping Allah would be merciful despite my imperfections. It was a scale, good deeds versus bad deeds, and I never knew if I'd done enough. Even Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, wasn't sure of his own salvation. The Quran records him saying he didn't know what would happen to him after death. If the prophet wasn't certain, how could I be? But Jesus showed me something completely different: grace, unmerited favor, unearned love. You cannot earn this, he said, his voice resonating through my consciousness as I watched the crucifixion. It's a gift. You can only receive it. All your prayers, all your fasting, all your good works, they were never enough, Marcus, because the standard is perfection and only I am perfect. I saw the theology with stunning clarity now. Jesus lived the perfect life I couldn't live. He died the death I deserved to die. And he rose again to offer anyone who would believe and receive eternal life, not earned through works, not achieved through religious performance, simply received as a gift. I lived the perfect life you couldn't live, he continued, as if reading my thoughts, which of course he could. I died the death you deserved to die, and I rose again to give you life, eternal life, if you will simply believe and receive. The simplicity of it was stunning, almost offensive to my works-based mindset, all my years of striving, trying to be good enough, wondering if I'd prayed enough, fasted enough, given enough charity, and it was all meaningless without him. The crucifixion scene remained before me. I saw Jesus take his final breath. It is finished, he said, not I am finished, but it is finished. The work of salvation was complete. The price was paid. The sacrifice was accepted. I watched them take his body down from the cross, watched them wrap him in burial cloths, watched them place him in the tomb and roll the massive stone across the entrance. And then I saw the tomb 3 days later, empty, the stone rolled away, the grave clothes lying flat where his body had been, angels announcing to the women who came to anoint his body, he is not here, he has risen, just as he said. I saw the risen Christ appearing to his disciples, to Thomas, who doubted, to Peter, who had denied him, to the 500 witnesses Paul would later write about. This wasn't legend developed decades later. This wasn't myth. This was historical reality that thousands of people witnessed and were willing to die defending. The disciples who had fled in fear when Jesus was arrested suddenly became bold proclaimers of his resurrection. Peter, who had denied knowing Jesus 3 times to save his own skin, stood before the same religious authorities who'd crucified Jesus and declared boldly, "You killed the author of life, but God raised him from the dead, and we are witnesses." They were tortured, imprisoned, killed, and not one of them recanted. Not one said, "Okay, we made it up." People don't die for lies they know are lies. They died because they'd seen the risen Christ with their own eyes, and nothing, not torture, not imprisonment, not death itself, could make them deny what they knew to be true. "You really died," I whispered, overwhelmed. "You really suffered. You really rose again." "Yes," Jesus said, "for you, Marcus, I did all of this for you." The crucifixion scene faded, but the weight of it remained, pressing against my consciousness, heavy and undeniable. Every lash of the whip, every thorn in the crown, every moment of agony. It was all for me, for Marcus, for the Muslim man who'd spent his entire adult life denying this very sacrifice. "I don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "How can you love me like this? I rejected you. I called your followers misguided. I told people the crucifixion was a lie invented by Christians. I defended Islam against Christianity with such confidence, such pride. I thought I was defending truth, but I was defending my own blindness." Jesus' response came with devastating gentleness. "Marcus, I've shown you the difference between what you believed and what is true. In Islam, you tried to earn salvation through works, prayer, fasting, charity, pilgrimage. You stacked up good deeds like bricks, hoping they would be enough. You lived with constant uncertainty, always wondering, have I prayed enough, fasted enough, given enough? Will Allah accept me on Judgment Day?" It was true, all of it. The anxiety had been constant, lurking beneath my religious devotion. Even my father, the Imam, would sometimes say in his sermons, "We can only hope for Allah's mercy. We cannot presume it. We cannot be certain." That uncertainty was baked into Islamic theology. Even Muhammad himself expressed doubt about his eternal fate in the Hadith. But this, Jesus gestured to the vision of the empty tomb, the risen Christ, the transformed disciples. This is different. This is grace, unmerited favor, unearned love. You cannot earn it, Marcus. You can only receive it. It's a gift, he continued, and his words resonated through every part of my being. All your prayers, all your fasting, all your good works, they were never enough because the standard is perfection, and only I am perfect. I lived the perfect life you couldn't live. I died the death you deserved to die. And I rose again to give you life, eternal life, if you will simply believe and receive. The simplicity was almost offensive to my works-based mindset. 34 years of striving, trying to accumulate enough good deeds to outweigh my sins, wondering if my prayers were recited correctly, if my fasting was pure enough, if my intentions were clean enough, and all of it was meaningless without him. But standing before him, or existing before him, I couldn't deny the logic. If salvation could be earned through human effort, then it wasn't really salvation. It was wages. It was something owed. But if it was a gift, freely given, purchased by God himself through his own sacrifice, then it was truly grace. So you're asking me, I began and stopped. Because I knew what he was asking, and the weight of it was crushing. Will you accept this gift? He asked, his voice both invitation and challenge, both gentle and demanding. Every fiber of my being wanted to say yes immediately. I'd seen the truth. I'd witnessed the crucifixion and the resurrection. I'd experienced his love. I knew with certainty beyond doubt, that he was exactly who he claimed to be. But the cost flashed through my mind like lightning. My family, my community, my identity as a Muslim, everything I'd built my entire life upon. If I said yes to Jesus, I lost everything else. If I say yes, I said slowly, the words heavy as stones, I lose everything. My father will disown me. My mother will weep for my soul. My friends at the mosque will call me apostate. In Islam, apostasy is punishable by death. I could be killed. I will certainly be rejected, erased from my family like I never existed. My name will become a curse, a warning to others. Look what happened to Marcus. He abandoned the faith. The weight of it was crushing. I thought of my father, Imam Hassan, his stern face and deep devotion. What would his expression be if he knew I'd become a Christian? The shame, the rage, the heartbreak. A son converting to Christianity would be worse than a son dying. At least in death, I'd still be Muslim. I thought of my mother, who'd prayed for me to be a faithful Muslim since the day I was born. She'd taught me my first Arabic prayers, kissed my forehead before every Ramadan fast, cooked special meals to break my fasts. How could I tell her that everything she taught me was incomplete, that the faith she'd passed down with such love was missing the most crucial truth? I thought of my friends at Al-Noor Islamic Center, Ahmed, Ibrahim, Khalid, Yusuf, the brothers I'd prayed shoulder to shoulder with for years. We'd celebrated Eid together, broken fasts together, discussed theology together. They would see me as a traitor, a kafir, someone who'd betrayed not just a religion but a community, a family, and identity. The approval of people or the truth, Jesus said, reading my thoughts. What do you treasure more, Marcus, the approval of people or the truth? His question cut through all my fears like a sword. And in that moment, clarity came. Painful, devastating, liberating clarity. The truth stood before me, radiant, undeniable, alive. I could deny what I'd seen, what I'd experienced, what I knew with absolute certainty. I could go back, if I even could go back, and pretend this never happened. I could return to Islam, to my family, to my community, to the comfortable certainty I'd lived in for 34 years. But I would know I was living a lie for the rest of my life. I would know I'd encountered truth himself and walked away. I would know that every prayer I recited toward Mecca was directed at a partial revelation, when I'd been offered the complete one. I would know that every fast I observed, every good deed I performed, every verse of Quran I memorized, was an attempt to earn what had already been freely offered as a gift. I couldn't do it. I couldn't turn away from truth itself, no matter what it cost. Yes, I said, and the word came from the deepest part of my soul, from a place I didn't know existed. Yes, Jesus, you are Lord, you are God, you are the way, the truth, and the life. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. I surrender. I give you everything I am and everything I have. The moment I spoke those words, yes, Jesus, you are Lord, something changed in that space of light. The light intensified, but instead of overwhelming me, it filled me. It poured into every part of my consciousness, into places I didn't even know existed within me. It wasn't just surrounding me anymore. It was inside me, transforming me, remaking me at the deepest level of my being. I was being born again, not metaphorically, actually spiritually, fundamentally reborn. The old Marcus, the Muslim Marcus who had lived for 34 years. who had prayed 5 times daily toward Mecca, who had fasted during Ramadan, who had memorized Quran verses, who had debated Christians with such confidence that Marcus was dying right there in that moment. The identity I'd clung to, the certainty I'd built my life upon, the religious performance I'd devoted myself to, all of it was being stripped away, burned away by the presence of Christ. And in its place, something new was emerging, a new Marcus, a follower of Christ, someone who knew Jesus not as a distant prophet from 2,000 years ago, but as a living, present, personal Lord and Savior. Joy exploded through me like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life, not the satisfied feeling after completing a good deed, not the pride after memorizing a new surah, not the sense of accomplishment after a successful fast. This was different. This was joy without conditions, without performance requirements, without uncertainty. This wasn't the stoic, duty-bound faith of Islam where I always wondered if I'd done enough, if my prayers were accepted, if my scale would tip toward paradise or hellfire. This was relationship, intimate and personal. This was love without conditions, without requirements, without the constant anxiety of have I earned it yet. This was freedom, real freedom, the kind I'd never tasted in 34 years of following Islamic law. Not freedom to do whatever I wanted, freedom from the burden of trying to earn salvation through my own efforts, freedom from the impossible task of being good enough for a holy God. This was life, real life, eternal life, not just existence that continues after death, but abundant, overflowing, purposeful life that begins now and extends forever. I was laughing and crying at the same time, or whatever the spiritual equivalent was without a physical body. Pure, unfiltered joy mixed with overwhelming gratitude and relief. Thank you, I kept saying over and over. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jesus smiled, and in that smile I saw joy mixed with something else, purpose. His voice came again, filled with both celebration and solemnity. Marcus, you must go back. The words hit me like cold water. No, I protested immediately, instinctively. No, I want to stay here with you. I don't want to return to that broken body, that painful world, that life of struggle. Here with you is perfect. It's complete. It's everything I've ever wanted without knowing I wanted it. Why would I ever leave this place? I meant it, the thought of returning to Earth, to that convenience store floor, to that dying body with 2 bullet wounds. It was horrifying. I'd tasted perfection. I'd experienced the presence of God himself. How could I go back to the shadow world of physical existence? But Jesus looked at me with eyes that held both compassion and determination. Because others need to hear what you've seen, he said, and each word carried the weight of eternity. Others who are trapped in darkness as you were trapped. Others who are searching for truth as you were searching. Muslims who need to know that I love them, that I died for them too, that there is a way to know God personally, not just to follow religious rules, but to actually know him. He continued, Christians who have forgotten the power of their faith, who take grace for granted, who have lost their first love. They need to remember what it cost for you to discover what they've known all along. And seekers, he added, skeptics, people questioning if truth even exists. If God is real, if there's more to life than what they can see and touch, you will tell them, you will testify to what you've experienced here. The commission was both invitation and command, both request and requirement. I felt the weight of it pressing against my consciousness. But it will cost you everything, he warned, his eyes holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. Your family may reject you. Your community will certainly persecute you. You may face violence, hatred, isolation. Some will call you a traitor, a fool, a liar. They'll say you made it all up, that the shooting damaged your brain, that you're mentally ill or deceived by Satan. The words hung in that space of light, heavy with truth. I thought about what awaited me back on earth. My father would disown me, I knew that with certainty. You are dead to me, he would say, and he would mean it literally. In Islam, apostasy, leaving the faith, is considered worse than physical death. At least a dead son is still Muslim. A son who converts to Christianity is a curse, a shame, a stain on the family name that can never be washed away. My mother would weep, not tears of grief for a dead son, but tears of horror for a son who'd abandoned Allah. She would pray for me to return to Islam, but she wouldn't speak to me. The community would shun her because of my apostasy. What kind of mother raises a child who leaves Islam? My friends at Al-Noor Islamic Center would call me apostate, kafir, murtad. In traditional Islamic jurisprudence across all 4 major schools of thought, the punishment for apostasy is death. Even if they didn't physically harm me, they would erase me socially, economically, relationally. I would be cut off completely. I could lose my job again. I'd already been shot. Now I'd be rejected by everyone I'd ever known. I'd be starting over with nothing. No family, no community, no support system. just Jesus and whatever Christians might be willing to accept a former Muslim into their fellowship. But I thought of the love he'd shown me, love that died on a cross, love that pursued me for 34 years even as I ran away, love that met me in death and offered me life. And I thought of the truth I now knew, truth that set me free from the bondage of works-based religion, truth that shattered my certainty and rebuilt it on a foundation that would never crack. I thought of my Muslim friends and family, still in darkness, still striving, still uncertain, still trying to earn what's freely offered as a gift. How could I keep this to myself? Yes, I said with conviction I didn't know I possessed. Yes, if you're with me, I can face anything. I'll go back, I'll testify. I'll tell them what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I know to be true, no matter what it costs. Jesus reached toward me, and though he was spirit and I was spirit, I felt his touch, solid, real, more substantial than any physical touch I'd ever felt. His hand on my shoulder sent warmth flooding through my entire being. Strength, courage, purpose, power. Then remember this moment, he said, his voice both gentle and commanding. When the world tears at you, when doubt creeps in, when fear overwhelms you, when you want to give up and go back, remember what you've seen here. Remember what you know. Remember that I am with you always, even to the end of the age. His words echoed through every part of my consciousness, carving themselves into my spiritual DNA, becoming part of who I was now. Go now, Marcus, go and testify to the truth. Go and tell them what you've seen. I will never leave you or forsake you. I felt myself being pulled backward, away from him, away from the light, not violently but purposefully, like a tide drawing back to the ocean. No, not yet. I wanted to stay longer, to ask more questions, to bask in his presence forever. But the light began to fade, not disappear, but relocate. It was moving from outside me to inside me, burning in the center of my consciousness where my heart would be if I had a body. Jesus remained visible for a moment longer, his hands still raised in blessing, his face radiant with love and authority. His final words echoed through my entire being as I was pulled away. I will never leave you or forsake you. Then the darkness returned, but different this time, not the empty, terrifying void I'd experienced after dying. This darkness was transitional, purposeful, like a tunnel leading somewhere. I was traveling back to my body, back to pain, back to life, back to a world that would never be the same. And I was carrying light with me. I gasped. A huge, desperate gulp of air that set my chest on fire. Pain exploded through every nerve in my body like electricity coursing through water. White-hot, searing, unbearable pain that made the shooting itself seem almost gentle in comparison. Someone was screaming, and I realized it was me. The sound tore from my throat, raw and primal, echoing off the walls of the convenience store. He's alive, oh my God, he's alive. A woman's voice, high-pitched with shock, the customer who had found me. I was still on the floor, still lying in my own blood, but everything was different. I was different. The blood was cold now, sticky, spreading in a dark pool around me that seemed impossibly large. How much blood had I lost? How long had I been dead? But I knew 8 minutes. I'd been clinically dead for 8 minutes. Paramedics rushed in. I could hear radios crackling, urgent voices shouting medical terms I didn't understand. 2 GSWs, chest and shoulder. Massive blood loss. We've got a pulse. How is that possible? Dispatch said he was code black. Hands on me, lifting, moving, causing white-hot agony that made me cry out again. I tried to speak, tried to tell them what had happened, where I'd been, who I'd seen. Jesus, I whispered, the word barely audible. Jesus. A paramedic leaned close, his face lined with concern and professional focus. Stay with us, buddy. We're going to save you. No, I whispered, fighting to form words through the pain and the blood in my mouth. Jesus already saved me. Confusion crossed his face, but there was no time to explain. They were lifting me onto a gurney, rushing me toward the ambulance. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through my chest and shoulder. I wanted to scream, but couldn't get enough air. I saw the store ceiling tiles passing above me as they wheeled me out. The fluorescent lights that had been the last thing I'd seen before dying, but now they looked different, brighter, more beautiful, more alive. Everything looked more real, more vivid, saturated with color and meaning. Because I had seen the other side, I had seen truth itself standing before me, and now this world seemed almost like a shadow in comparison. The rain was still falling outside. Cold drops hit my face as they loaded me into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. Sirens wailed. The vehicle lurched forward, speeding through Detroit's late-night streets toward the hospital. BP's dropping. We're losing him again. Start another IV. Push fluids. Come on, stay with us. I could feel myself slipping, consciousness fading like water through cupped hands. But this time I wasn't afraid. Jesus had promised, "I will never leave you or forsake you." If I died again, I knew where I was going. I knew who would be waiting. But I also knew he'd sent me back for a reason. There was work to do, testimony to give, truth to proclaim. I forced my eyes to stay open, forced myself to breathe despite the crushing pain in my chest. That's it, keep breathing, we're almost there. Surgery was a blur, bright lights, masked faces, the smell of antiseptic mixing with blood, someone saying the bullet missed his heart by less than an inch, 1 centimeter to the right, and then darkness as anesthesia pulled me under. But not the darkness of death, just sleep, deep, dreamless sleep, where my ravaged body could begin the impossible work of healing. I remember coming out of it hours later, disoriented and in excruciating pain that medication could barely touch. My chest felt like it had been crushed in a vice. Every breath was agony. My left arm was immobilized, shoulder wrapped in bandages. A doctor stood by my bed, a middle-aged black man with graying temples and kind eyes, that held an expression of amazement mixed with professional composure. "Mr. Marcus Al-Rashid," he said, reading from my chart, "you're incredibly lucky to be alive. The bullet that struck your chest missed your heart by less than an inch, about 1 centimeter to the right, and you'd be dead. You lost nearly 40% of your blood volume. You were clinically dead for 8 minutes. By all rights, you shouldn't be here. Your brain should have suffered massive, irreversible damage from oxygen deprivation. He paused, searching for the right word. "It's a miracle." Yes, I agreed, my voice weak and raspy. It was a miracle, but not the way you think. The doctor smiled, probably assuming I was delirious from medication or trauma. But I knew what I knew. I had died. I had met Jesus. And I'd come back with a mission that would cost me everything. Within the hour, my family arrived. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice in the hallway, crying, thanking Allah for sparing me. My father's deeper tones, stern and controlled even in crisis. My younger brother Ahmed's questions to the nurses. Then they were in my room. My mother rushed to my bedside, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed my good hand, her tears falling on my skin as she kissed my fingers. "Marcus, my son, Allah be praised, you're alive. I thought I'd lost you." She was thanking Allah for his mercy, praising his name for protecting me. My father stood at the foot of the bed, his Imam composure barely hiding his relief. "You survived, son. Allah was merciful. He protected you." Ahmed looked shaken, traumatized by the thought of losing his older brother. His eyes were red from crying. "Marcus, they said you were dead. They said your heart stopped for 8 minutes." I wanted to tell them everything immediately. The words burned in my throat, demanding to be spoken. I wanted to say, I did die, and while I was dead, I met Jesus, and he showed me that everything we believe is incomplete. He is the way, the truth, and the life. But looking at their faces, my mother's tear-stained cheeks, my father's carefully controlled emotions, Ahmed's traumatized expression, the words died before reaching my lips. How could I tell them, how could I explain what I'd seen? That their faith, their devotion, their entire lives dedicated to Islam were missing the most crucial truth, that Jesus, whom they believed was just a prophet, was actually God himself. "I'm okay," I whispered instead, hatting myself for the lie. "Everything's going to be okay." But I was lying because I knew nothing would ever be okay again. Everything was about to change in ways they couldn't imagine, and I had maybe days, maybe only hours, before I'd have to tell them the truth that would tear our family apart. The truth is worth any cost, I reminded myself, echoing Jesus' words. But as I looked at my mother's relieved face and my father's proud expression, I wondered, was I strong enough to pay that cost? 3 days in the hospital recovering from surgery. They kept me on a morphine drip for the pain, but nothing could numb what I was feeling inside. The physical wounds would heal, the doctors assured me of that. But the spiritual transformation that had occurred while I was dead, that would never be reversed. I replayed the experience constantly in my mind, examining it from every angle, searching for any explanation that would let me dismiss it as hallucination or oxygen deprivation. Jesus' face, his words, the crucifixion, the empty tomb, the love that had washed over me when I said yes. Was it real? In the quiet moments between visitors, doubt would whisper its questions. Or was it just brain chemistry, lack of oxygen, a dying mind producing comforting images? Medical science would say that's all it was. Neurons misfiring, the temporal lobe creating religious experiences, the brain protecting itself from the terror of death with pleasant hallucinations. But no, I knew it was real with a certainty beyond logic, beyond scientific explanation. I had met truth face to face. I had encountered the living God, and nothing, not skepticism, not rationalization, not fear, could make me deny what I knew. My Quran sat on the bedside table, brought by my father, who expected me to read it during recovery. He'd placed it there reverently, kissed it, and told me to thank Allah for my survival by reciting from his holy book. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I looked at that familiar green cover with gold Arabic script, I felt a strange disconnect, like looking at something from another life, from another person entirely. The verses I'd memorized since childhood now seemed incomplete, like reading the first half of a story and never getting to the ending. The Bible, I needed a Bible, but how could I ask for one? My family was visiting twice daily. Other members of the mosque community stopped by with flowers and cards that said, "Get well soon" in English and Arabic. Everyone assumed I was still Muslim, still one of them, still part of the Ummah. If I asked for a Bible, word would spread through the community like wildfire within hours. On the second day, a nurse came in to check my vitals. She was different from the others, older, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. As she adjusted my IV and checked the bandages on my chest and shoulder, I noticed something half hidden beneath her scrubs. A small cross necklace on a thin silver chain. My heart started beating faster. The monitor beside my bed beeped, registering the increased heart rate. "Are you in pain?" she asked, concerned. "No," I hesitated, then took the leap. "Are you a Christian?" She looked surprised, her eyes darting to the doorway, then back to me. "Yes, I am. Why do you ask?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I need to talk to someone about Jesus." Her surprise deepened. She glanced at the doorway again, checking if anyone could overhear us, then sat down in the chair beside my bed, her professional duties momentarily forgotten. "I thought you were Muslim," she said gently. "I saw your family praying in here earlier." "I was," I said, tears starting to flow, physical tears this time, not spiritual ones. "But I'm not anymore. I can't be, not after what I saw when I died." She leaned forward, listening intently as I told her everything. The shooting, the death, the darkness, the light, meeting Jesus, the crucifixion vision, the choice, the commission to go back and testify. When I finished, she was crying too, tears streaming down her face, her hand covering her mouth. "You've been given an incredible gift," she said after a long moment, "but also an incredible burden." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling helpless and lost and overwhelmed. "My family, they can't know, not yet, I don't know what they'll do. My father is an imam. In our community, leaving Islam is," I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Apostasy," she said quietly, understanding in her eyes. "They could kill me or disown me, which might be worse. I'll lose everything, my family, my friends, my community, everything I've known my entire life." "You follow him," she said simply, firmly, with a conviction that reminded me of Jesus's own voice. "No matter the cost. You've seen what I've only believed by faith. You've encountered the risen Christ. You can't unsee that. You can't unknow that." She was right, of course she was right, but the knowing and the doing were separated by a chasm of fear. She gave me her card before she left. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she attended Grace Community Church, the same church I'd walked past on Christmas Eve 3 years ago. The church where I'd felt that inexplicable peace and run away from it. Jesus had been calling me even then, I realized, even when I didn't know his voice. "Call me when you're ready," Sarah said. "My pastor will want to hear your story, and you'll need support, brothers and sisters in Christ who understand what you're going through." After she left, I held her card in my good hand and prayed, really prayed, not reciting memorized Arabic phrases, but talking to Jesus like he was right there in the room with me, because he was. He'd promised never to leave me or forsake me. "Give me strength," I whispered. "Give me courage. Help me tell them the truth, no matter what it costs." 2 weeks after being released from the hospital, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The truth was burning inside me like a fire I couldn't contain. Every moment I spent pretending to still be Muslim felt like betrayal. Betrayal of what I'd seen, what I'd experienced, what I knew. It was a Sunday afternoon, and my whole family had gathered for dinner at my parents' house in Dearborn. My mother had made biryani, my favorite dish, celebrating my survival and recovery. The smell of spices filled the house, familiar and comforting and heartbreaking all at once. We sat around the table, Mom, Dad, Ahmed, my sister Fatima, and my uncle Ibrahim. The conversation was light, normal. They asked about my physical therapy, about when I'd be able to return to work, about the police investigation into the shooting. After dinner, as tea was served, sweet chai in small glass cups, the way my mother always made it, I knew it was time. My hands were shaking. My heart pounded harder than it had during the shooting. "I need to tell you all something," I began. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to me, curious and concerned. "When I was shot, I died. I was dead for 8 minutes." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father nodded gravely, waiting for me to continue. "And while I was dead, something happened. I met." The words caught in my throat like broken glass. This was it, the moment that would change everything, the moment I'd lose my family. "I met Jesus Christ, and he showed me the truth." Silence fell over the room, horrible, suffocating silence. Then my father's voice came, cold as ice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Jesus is God, that he died for my sins and rose again, that he is the only way to salvation." My voice was steady now, growing stronger with each word. "I can't be Muslim anymore, Dad. I'm a follower of Christ now." Chaos erupted instantly. My mother burst into tears, wailing, "No, no, this can't be happening. Not my son." My father stood up so fast his chair fell backward, clattering against the floor. His face turned red with rage. "This is apostasy. You're betraying everything. Your family, your faith, your heritage." Ahmed looked at me with pure confusion mixed with horror. "Marcus, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? Did the shooting damage your brain?" Fatima just stared, shock and disgust on her face. She wouldn't even look directly at me. My uncle Ibrahim began shouting in Arabic, calling me traitor, kafir, murtad, apostate, infidel, one who deserves death. "You hit your head," my father shouted, his voice shaking the walls. "The shooting damaged your brain. You need to see a doctor, a psychiatrist." "No, Dad," I said, trying to stay calm despite tears flowing down my face. "My brain is fine. My heart is finally seeing clearly for the first time in my life." "You will take this back," he commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You will repent and return to Islam. This is just confusion from trauma." "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. "I won't lie about what I saw. Jesus is real, and he saved me. He is the truth I've been searching for my whole life." My father's next words cut deeper than any bullet ever could. "Then you are no longer my son. Get out of this house. You are dead to me. You are dead to this family. We will mourn you as if you died in that store." I lost everything I'd built over 34 years. My father disowned me. My mother wept for my soul. Friends became strangers. Death threats filled my inbox, detailed descriptions of what apostates deserve, according to Sharia law many still follow. Someone spray-painted "traitor" across my apartment door in red letters. I scrubbed it off alone, my shoulder still healing from the bullet wound, wondering if whoever did this would come back with more than paint. I was fired from Quick Stop. "I can't employ an apostate," my Muslim manager said. "You understand, right?" I understood. Truth costs everything. But then Grace Community Church, that same church I'd walked past on Christmas Eve years ago, feeling inexplicable peace before running away, welcomed me. Pastor David embraced me. "Welcome home, brother." I was baptized in June. Going under the water, I thought of the old Marcus dying, the one who tried to earn salvation through works. Rising up, I thought of the new Marcus being born, someone who knew Jesus personally, who'd experienced grace, who was free. I met Alina at a small group meeting, another ex-Muslim convert with a story eerily similar to mine, different details, same Jesus. We understood each other's losses, each other's joy. 2 years later, she became my wife. God gave me a new family to replace the one I'd lost. 5 years have passed since that night on the Quick Stop floor. The messages still come. Last week, a young man named Ahmed, same name as my brother, knocked on my door. He'd seen my testimony online. "I had a dream about a man in white robes calling my name," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching. Was that Jesus?" I invited him in. We talked for 3 hours over tea. He left with a Bible hidden under his jacket and tears in his eyes. That's happened 17 times now. 17 Muslims who contacted me privately, asking questions they'd never dared to ask. 17 souls who encountered the same Jesus I met. I also get messages from Christians. "Your story reminded me what grace cost. I've been taking it for granted. I forgot that Jesus is real, not just a theological concept. Thank you for showing me what I've known my whole life but never truly appreciated." Even skeptics write, "I don't believe in anything, but your experience makes me wonder if there's something more than what I can see." I still touch my chest sometimes, feeling the scar where the bullet entered, 1 centimeter from my heart. The scar is permanent, so is what I brought back from death, a light that still burns inside me. My father still won't speak to me. My name is still a curse in the community I grew up in. Some nights, the loneliness crushes me. The cost was higher than I imagined when I said yes to Jesus in that light. But I'd pay it again and again and again. Because I died believing one thing and came back knowing another. I went into eternity as a Muslim and returned as a follower of Christ. The transformation is permanent and real. What you do with my story, that's between you and whatever truth you encounter. My door is always open. So is his. Sometimes people ask me, do you ever doubt what you saw? What if it was just oxygen deprivation, brain chemistry, a hallucination? I understand the question. Medical science would say that's all it was, neurons misfiring in a dying brain. But I know what I know. I stood before truth itself. I saw the crucifixion not as history, but as reality. I felt love that died on a cross for me personally. I experienced grace that can't be earned, only received. The shooting was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Meeting Jesus was the best. 5 years later, I'm still here, still testifying, still watching Muslims, Christians, and Seekers encounter the same Jesus who changed everything for me. The jar in my closet, the Hajj fund I saved for 16 months, sits empty now. I never made it to Mecca. But I've been somewhere better. I've been to the other side, and I came back with a message I can't keep silent about, no matter what it costs. Jesus is real, the gospel is true, heaven and hell are real. And he's still calling people, maybe even you, right now as you read these words. I answered, everything changed, everything.